Welcome to the Leaderonomics show. I'm with Dr. Henry Toy, who is author of Habits of Success and also Executive Director of Brain Capital. Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this whole space.
Okay, maybe to give you a background of what I did before. I was working with the central bank. That was my first job.
The Singapore Central Bank
in Singapore.
Okay.
And so I was in finance for several years. And one of the things that I noticed about working in the central bank is that they were looking more at how people think rather than the content. In my very first job that I got from the central bank, I remember asking him, the HR director, a simple question. I said, I'm a civil engineer and I have no knowledge of, or very little knowledge about finance and about the markets. And so I asked him a simple question. I said, why did you choose me, plus many others who were not directly involved, in terms of studies in
the finance
space? And he gave me a very interesting answer at that time. And he said, we are actually looking at how you think. We selected the candidates here based on how you think and not so much of your knowledge. And this was some years ago, and he said, knowledge we can teach you. In fact, whatever you've learned in school, it's not very useful here because we're going to retrain you. But your thinking is what we value. And so from that day onwards, I thought about, we actually need to be quite conscious and quite clear about our thinking.
Yeah.
And over the years, I realized that a lot of people, when they think, they actually, when they think, they think to plan, right? But very few and very rare would you find somebody who say that I plan to think.
Plan to think. Huh?
Yeah. So they tend to think to plan.
Think to plan, yes.
But they hardly plan to think.
So they're actually giving your time space to think and
yes. So when I talk about plan to think, what I meant was the kind of thinking you want to engage in when you attack a certain type of problem.
But is that a skill that we can learn? I mean, the capacity to think.
Yes.
Because you said the Singapore Central Bank hired because of your thinking.
Yes.
Obviously, they have a belief that you can't really change that. I assume, which is why they want to go and hire thinkers.
Yes.
Is that something we can develop if we have not?
Well, definitely you can develop that. In fact, what kind of led me into this space, into this area of work, is that I discovered a few years later that you can actually train your thinking and you can actually learn to think. And when you learn to think, you are literally becoming more intelligent.
Okay.
And so that excited me.
Okay.
So I went into this space of work. And what I think the central bank was saying at that time was not that you cannot train your thinking, but it took a little longer to train your thinking. So that's what they are looking for, how you think. And then they said, when you add on the content, the basic knowledge of the markets,
then it becomes very powerful.
Yeah, it can become very powerful.
So did that lead you to writing this book?
Yes. So that's the reason why I wrote this book called Habits of Success. Because what I learned was that over the years, somehow, some way, I learned how to think that way. But when I went into this field of study and I kind of researched a lot, and I based my dissertation was actually on thinking processes applied to project management. And I realized that you can actually change that and you can actually learn it.
Okay.
But for the general so-called population, generally what people did was that they stumbled across it. In other words, they thought, okay, I kind of became good at this accidentally.
Yeah.
Whereas what I've done in this book is to tell people you can cultivate it.
Okay.
You can actually farm it.
So what would be some ways to do that?
Okay, to give an example, let's look at this whole idea of thinking flexibly, right? And I want to link that to the current environment that the world is in. And one of the things that are being tossed around today in the whether it's business world or even in education world, it is the whole concept of VUCA. And that VUCA basically stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment.
Okay.
And that was developed in the 1990s by a US military academy. But what it does mean is that today, if you were to market a new product, the certainty of your results are not guaranteed. In fact, quite a high chance that when you have developed a plan and you go out there and you execute that plan,
You fail.
chances are things change and you don't get what you really
Yep.
planned for. And that's the current environment that we're in. Just look at climate change. It's become a bit unpredictable. A key example would be in Singapore. We are currently experiencing a lot of flooding, which is very unusual. We fixed that problem 50 years ago, but it came back. And it came back not because of poor planning, but because the climate changed. So we have 1 in 50 year rain, with 1 in 100 year rain within a week. That's statistically unusual.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? So we, in my book, we talk about suppleness of thinking as one way to
Suppleness,
manage
okay.
this. So suppleness means flexibility in thinking. Flexibility in thinking means that when you have a problem and you're working on it, or you have a plan and you're working on it, you need to have various options open. When that plan doesn't deliver, it's on what it promised. And so now when we teach business leaders, students, educators, we tell them that it's not simply finding the right answer, right? Because you can find the right answer in the textbook. But a lot of problems that we should be handling and we should be good at would be questions that have no immediate answer. And when you do not have an immediate answer, you need to be more flexible
Yep.
in your
Approach.
thinking. And so one of the ways would be to look at different perspectives to that problem. A second way would be to look at different options available to solve this problem.
Okay.
And instead of just choosing one, you may want to rank the options and decide that maybe we should have 3 possible solutions and get them all ready. But implement one and then get ready that if anything changed, we would be able to get option 2 or option 3. Plan A, plan B, plan C kind of idea.
Okay, it's fantastic. What if I'm a young kid just graduating from university? What kind of advice would you give me, in terms of how can I implement some of these things that you talked about into my life and become successful in my career?
Okay, so if you're a young graduate or a new graduate and you're looking for jobs and you're going for interviews or you're looking at a prospective employer, one of the things is to be quite clear as to what is your strength in
Okay.
terms of your thinking skills. And not just thinking skills, but your disposition, in other words, your tendency to use that. And I think throughout the process of the interviews, like what I went through many years ago, is that the employer is looking at your thinking abilities.
Yep.
Not so much as, I know, the 4 Ps of marketing, I know,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. Well, that's textbook knowledge. Today, you can get that for $9.99 because that's
Or you can
basically
Google it.
the internet fee that you pay a month.
Yep.
Yeah, you can Google it, and your employers can Google it too.
Absolutely.
But what they want to know is, how are you processing this information? What are you going to do when a situation arises when you're not, everybody is stumped?
Yep.
Do you have a range of answers? Do you have various options open to you? You need to demonstrate that to your employer. And if you can successfully demonstrate that at the interview, you have an edge over everybody else.
Okay. So what if I'm a CEO, what advice would you give me?
As a CEO, one of the things that we recommend, and this is what we teach as well in our courses, is that you need to find time to think. That's number one. You need to
So plan
find
to think,
time to think, and so that's planning to think, right? And when you find that time to think, you need to know how to think about that problem. And so I've interviewed and spent time with top CEOs, and I find that the successful ones, those who were very good at it and who seem to be less stressed out, are those who tell me that, I spend 2 hours a day on my own, quietly, thinking about things. Whether it's before
If
the
only
office,
we had time, right?
yeah, and or after work.
But you're right, we have to make, these guys have to make time.
Exactly,
right?
and
it's
they find
critical
that
to success. Right?
when they invest that time, the problems that come to them during the day is usually solved, more efficiently.
Or at least they've prioritized and figured out.
That's right,
how-
and they feel less stressed because they've turned over things in their minds on their own, or they just spend time quietly figuring things out, and that's one of the habits of top CEOs.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Dr. Henry Toy, thank you so much for being part of us.
Oh, thank you.
We've been speaking to Dr. Henry Toy, Executive Director of Brain Capital, here on the Leaderonomics Show.